Hi, this is Vladimir Štimac from Anadolu Efes. You're listening Sweet 16, best podcast out there.
Four places. It's time to go full court press. The playoffs are underway. It's Sweet 16. Tune in.
Hello and welcome to Sweet 16, an open look on EuroLeague basketball, as always with me, Moshe from Team Scout, and with my great friends and co-hosts. But just before we move it back to, move it to them, Thunder, welcome back. It's so good to have you back from the States. How was the big city?
It was great, like New Orleans, Memphis, and Nashville. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you know it was an adventurous route home, but back in Dublin eventually. It was a great trip.
Ari's buddy, how you doing? How's Athens treating you, the life, basketball, EuroLeague basketball, and everything that surrounds it?
Hello everyone. Well, it's the time of the year that we are always eager to see and watch the best games of the season, and it's a treat. You know, having the NBA playoffs, having the EuroLeague playoffs, having a phenomenal Euro Cup finals, and even having the BCL Final Four in town. It's gonna be a basketball-heavy season at least until June.
Well, we can say so far for sure we've welcomed two teams back into the EuroLeague, one of which was obviously the Rushafaka, the other was Budućnost. Last night after they won obviously this show is being recorded prior to the playoffs, so yeah, the championship was won last night. So welcome to these two teams, but it's time to talk whatever it is we need to talk. Emmett? We're going to have about 4 different 4-minute warnings?
Essentially, yeah, Moshe. So, slight detour, pardon the mention of the EuroLeague sponsor there, from the normal format. Although those who listened to the show last season know what it is, and anyone who didn't as well, it's obvious what we're going to do. So, we've got 4 playoff series. So we're just going to go through each of those in order. Just to go through the 4R for those of you who somehow have your heads buried. It's CSKA Khimki, Panathinaikos Real Madrid, Fenerbahce Baskonia, and Olympiacos Zalgiris. And one entirely housekeeping thing to bear in mind as we get underway is one of the games right now is likely to change its start time, or at least not likely, but is potentially going to change its start time. That is Game 3, 20th of April, Real Madrid and Panathinaikos, clashes of the Champions League soccer game. So for those of you who might have missed that, obviously it was covered by Eurohoops as well already. That game may yet, and well, actually, I think the odds will be changing its start time because logically that suits. But that's the boring part out of the way. We're going to get into the fun part now, which is the actual discussing the pairings. And we're going to start off with our first, 4-minute warning, as Moshe was calling it. And that is the Russian derby, the Moscow derby, between CSKA Moscow and Khimki Moscow region. And I suppose, starting with Aris, it's looking at these two sides, like the nature of their seasons. CSKA had the type of season you expect CSKA to have in EuroLeague. Consistent, dominant, got the job done. Khimki, I think, looked a bit like, at times, and Aris, you were hard selling the fact that their name was what people had them low selling early in the year. When they were fully healthy or close to fully healthy, they looked badass, but staying fully healthy was definitely a challenge. What can they do against CSKA, is what I'm asking. What can Khimki do to make the 1 versus 8 series competitive?
Well, you know what? I think that we might see a competitive series, but I wouldn't bet against CSKA Moscow, to say it simple as it is. And since Khimki has not found a solution in getting Robinson playing at his full strength and at his normal level, I think that it will be a stretch to believe that Khimki can surprise CSKA Moscow in 3 games. If we were speaking about just a knockout game, yes, Khimki should have more than a fighting chance, but this is different. This is a playoff, and generally speaking, CSKA Moscow has a tendency to dominate the playoffs, and doing it against a team from the same country should be even easier for them. They have everything, okay, and they are playing good basketball. So yes, it's as simple as that. Sved should have a phenomenal outing, the front line should defend as hell, and even that may not be enough against a team that has almost everything. The fact that Kyle Hines may miss some of those playoff games might be considered a chink in the armor of CSKA Moscow, but they have too many solutions and too many weapons. I think that CSKA can even aim for a sweep in this series.
And like Moshe, just on like what Ars bringing up there, like CSKA probably missing Hines for part of this series. Like anyone who watches this sport knows how important Kyle Hines is at EuroLeague level, like for an elite level side. When you're so deep that missing Kyle Hines mightn't be a problem, how big a problem is that for Himki on the other side? Like when like CSKA have that many options and that many ways to build around essentially the sort of hole that missing a Kyle Hines level player brings.
I'd love to answer that question, but I have a question of my own. Have you subscribed yet?
Very good point. You all should be subscribing, especially given we're in that time of the season where we're going to be doing an awful lot of stuff.
Well, yeah, we're all actually subscribers to our own channel, and we know that a very good amount, and from you guys is also are also avid followers. So back to Emmett's question. Look, Kyle Hines is without a doubt one of the guys. He's the man in that team. Even though there are some players that you can say that are more important in some aspects of the game, Kyle Hines is somewhat of an anchor in CSKA, and not having him is going to make things harder for them. At the same time, though, we have to acknowledge that Thomas Robinson has not been back to his full self since his wrist injury, and that's not all. We do know that Tyler Honeycutt has missed also a good amount of games, and not having these two guys firing at all cylinders, that could prove to be a bigger issue for them. If you're comparing absences and contributions by those that should have been but not quite playing. Now, my question is to you guys. Obviously, if we're CSKA, we just want to play CSKA basketball, which means a whole lot of pick and roll, a whole lot high tempo, a lot of shooters execution to perfection, perhaps. But the biggest question is, if you are Himki, what is your strategy? Knowing that there is only one Shved, you don't know how Robinson's going to come to the playoffs, you don't know if Honeycutt's going to be in the playoffs, then what's going to be his contribution?
The only option, Moshe, when you're in that situation Himki is in, is to gamble heavy on the strengths you have and the strengths you might have. Like, I think, Thomas Robinson's the best example of that, the strengths you might have. Because, we only had him at full health for a few games this season, but he looked really like the answer for what Kimki needed to be a Final Four side at full health. He was sort of like the difference, and we were remember there was that brief period in the season where Kimki were second, and it wasn't through flukiness, it was because, through that early stint, they had been the second best side in EuroLeague. And, obviously then, the injuries and sort of the, lack of depth sort of started to mount up. Well, lack of depth, by elite level standards, obviously. That's always an important qualifier. And so if you're Kimki, you're kind of going, well, right, we know we got to feed Shved like a madman. We got to hope that Thomas Robinson can, play through the pain closer to his top level. And because it's about playing to win rather than playing to not lose, which is cliched, but kind of accurate when it comes to when you're the underdog, because Kimki know they have some guys who can deliver an awful lot. Probability says in a 5-game series or best of 5-game series, they won't deliver enough for you to win it all. But if you're playing more about minimizing your holes, you're just asking to be swept, because you might have 3 close games, but they're 3 games you're almost certainly going to lose. Whereas if you go a bit more full tilt, to use the poker terminology, you might get whooped badly, but your chances of actual victory improve significantly. So it's simple, it's kind of dumb, and it could lead to some pretty terrible basketball if when it doesn't work, and some very exciting basketball if it does, by the way. So that's also a reason to watch the neutral. So if you're Kimmy, you just got to bet on yourself that you are going to be able to pull it off. Now, if you want an example of that going wrong, and right at the in consecutive games, look at the Greece games in the knockout stages of last Eurobasket, where what they built. Now there's obviously a lot more at stake there, but they betted themselves hard both games in the knockout stages. Round of 16 worked great, quarterfinals not so great would be the nicest way of phrasing it. And I think our Greek listeners will definitely think that's being very kind. And but like that's the bottom line. When you're in that position, when you've got issues, you've got to just call your own number essentially in this situation. I know Aris, like if you're Kimki, like what's your plan to beat Cheska?
Well, to tell you the truth, everything should start from defense, okay? But even that will not be enough. I don't think that simply playing good defense can make a difference. You will need the best possible game, okay? And it's easy to say that, okay, you will stop the Colo and that will create issues in the offensive efficiency of CSKA. It's easy to say that if you take Chacho, let's say, out of the equation, maybe they will have a problem in their creation. But I'm also curious, like you, to see what will be the strategy that Coach Barjokas will choose, because you know, when you consider yourself not the better team in a playoff series, uh, the first thing is to try to slow down the opponent, and that means less possession, a lot of half-court sets, a slow tempo game, every usual trick that there is on a playbook in order to don't let CSKA take a lot of possessions, and then hoping that your efficiency will keep you in the game. That's an obvious one. But here's the tricky part. Can you imagine Hinkie playing slow tempo or trying to slow down things? This is not the DNA of this team. They are, they live and die mainly on the offensive end, and their defense, it's much more a matter of pride on one-on-one situations, and also rebounding is one of the main defensive strengths of the team. So I'm really curious to see what will happen. Because on the other hand, you have a CSKA Moscow that will have a very clear game plan. Get Zved out of the equation and let everyone else try to beat us. I think that it's obvious when you play a team like Himki that this is the way to do things. Of course, Coach Itoudis can also surprise us, but on the one hand, you have a very specific game plan that was utilized pretty much by anyone during the season. And on the other hand, you have a puzzle that can't be solved. There is no such thing like an easy solution or an easy thing to do against CSKA and say that if you do that, then you will have a higher chance of succeeding against them. They simply have everything. And considering that they also had some injury woes, we take for granted how good they were during the regular season. They had a phenomenal regular season. And considering that they lost Milos Theodosic, this is an even bigger fit. And they have a player that it's a great boost compared to last season, and I'm speaking about Will Clyburn, who is practically an addition that only adds things to a roster that was in a real need of a glue guy who can defend multiple positions and has the athleticism to match up with pretty much anyone in the EuroLeague. So things are pretty bad for Khimki Moscow region.
So, and Aris, we've talked a lot about the Kimki side of this because obviously they're the underdogs, but on the Cheska side, like we've reached that point like over the last forever that when Cheska enter a playoff series, we expect them to win it, and then obviously likewise with the regular season, be it in the current format or being in any previous format, we also didn't put up stellar numbers there in terms of the win-loss record. But is there anything we've seen this season that informs us as to what they might look like come the Final Four, given their tendency to lose semi-finals in recent years? Well, basically tendency to lose semi-finals that aren't in Berlin in recent years, essentially. So like, is there anything sort of we've seen this season that might give us more reason to see what will happen with them in a single elimination format, assuming they get to Belgrade?
Yes, and this is also one thing that was not discussed much. Nando De Colo is, of course, the focal point of the team, but he's not the only guy who can make things happen. There is also Sergio Rodriguez, and also I'm a real believer on what Clyburn can bring on the table. I believe that there is Sergio Rodriguez, there is Will Clyburn, there is Kyle Hines, of course, who can make a play which will not be spectacular. It will be just a rebound or a good box out, and he will win the game for you. And also, we haven't talked a lot about, I think, the greatest unsung hero of CSKA Moscow. While we always try to give credit to guys like Vorontsevich and Will Clyburn and even Othello Hunter, who are providing very important things, not only to the chemistry of the team, but also they are making great plays. And of course, Leo Westerman has to be mentioned here. I think that the guy who is really underappreciated in this team is Corey Higgins. Corey Higgins is the model of efficiency. He's playing alongside Nando De Colo, and he's even more efficient. The fact that he's just complementing De Colo and Rodriguez, and he's not doing more than he's expected to do in order to keep the chemistry of the team on the right note, is what maybe keeps him a little bit under the radar. I think that with all the ghosts of the past gone, with CSKA finally winning the title under Coach Itoudis, I think that this is not the usual version of the CSKA Moscow team that we were used to seeing in previous Final Fours, when the pressure of not winning the title in recent years was tremendous.
And like Moshe, like even the way Aris was listing off the names there, it's sort of, I don't think you need to remind, we need to remind ourselves, sorry, of just how comically deep this CSKA side is, because most of those guys would start for playoff teams in EuroLeague, and nearly none of them do. Like, I've always used Vitaly Fritzon as the great example of when he's your fifth best guard, you're doing pretty darn good. Like, you're looking at those options for CSKA, like, what are you looking to see from them in this series?
A lot of scoring, bottom line. Because they always manage to find a way to score. They are so smart, they are so efficient. As a matter of fact, I think the only way to get them is not to out-defend them, because you cannot really defend CSKA. You have to outscore them. How you do that? Now that's a completely different story. And having said that, guys, predictions time for this series. I'm saying somewhere between a sweep and a 3-1 at best. CSKA.
I'm gonna say a sweep for CSKA. I just don't see Kimki pulling off a single game in this one.
Yes, they are the main candidates to be swept, but I will give them a game 3-1.
And that is settled. Thunder, bring us to our next playoff series.
Yeah, and their next one is probably the one that's got most tongues wagging across Europe with understandable reason. Panathinaikos and Real Madrid. The 4-5 matchup is obviously generally the one people get most interested in anyway, like, even though it's only the second year of this format. I think going forward, it's unlikely to see that not being the go-to pairing really in the playoffs, because we've had two fantastic in terms of, like, what we expect to see beforehand series, although set up beforehand. Obviously last year the 4-5 ended in a sweep, but at the same time it was a 4-5 we're going into kind of going, oof, what's going to happen here. Again, it's an oof, what's going to happen here series. Like, Panathinaikos, obviously their exceptional home record, undeniably brilliant. Real Madrid, such a good squad, but we've seen so many things we have to deal with this year in terms of injuries. The Sergio Yui one, the constant rotation at the 5, and obviously the need to get format. And all the way around that, the evolution continued of Luka Doncic, who basically has got, well, we used to say the trade column inches, I suppose, more data about him in terms of textual love than any other player in Europe right now, and an awful lot of great columns from US people. I've got to say, the quality of US writing on Luka Doncic has really gone up in the last year, because there was we took the mick out of some guys, and like we liked their interest, but we still figured, could you learn a bit more about what's going on here when you're trying to judge him? And they kind of did listen, not necessarily us directly, but to the people. And like the quality of writing from our US contemporaries has really, really gone up on Luka in the last year. So obviously it's going to be a lot of eyes on Luka Doncic in the series. It's sort of the glamour series, and he's the star player for one side. But going up against him is the guy who is, for most, I think, people on this who listen to this show, the actual MVP of the season, Nick Calathes, who's been just an absolute all-out leader for Panathinaikos this season. And so that's an interesting one, because obviously Calathes, who's got his over and back story with EuroLeague, and as the young gun goes over to the NBA, comes back, grows into this leadership role in Panathinaikos. Now you've got the Euro young gun who's considering going over as well. So there's so many little things going on here, but there is also a series to be dealt with. So Moshe, I'm going to go to you on this one first. Like, what stands out to you as being the key factors in this Panathinaikos versus Real in terms of the actual basketball as opposed to the storylines?
Well, I'm going to surprise you. First, I see two big, huge problems for Panathinaikos. And no, I'm not referring to the fact that they're playing at home in the playoffs, as if, we're trying to remember what happened last year. I am talking about problem number one. There's a slight chance that Yui would be back. And just knowing that he's back, we all know that sometimes it serves some sort of, let's say, mental reinforcement for an already strong side. Problem number two, Doncic is back. We knew that he had some weeks where his numbers were good, but not brilliant good as we gotten used to. We are seeing him getting back into the rhythm. Now, throughout the season, and throughout the Eurobasket, and throughout the season before, eyes were on Luka Doncic. Did it stop him from performing? Not so much. Now, on the other hand, the silver lining, the shining light, the hope, the great point guard of the competition, the greatest even, I would say, as in pure point guard. I am talking about Nick Calathes, perhaps arguably the best point guard of the season, the MVP, as many would claim, and rightfully so, I would say. We have to look at it from a very specific angle. Obviously, the game plan would try to take Nick Calathes out of the game and make Pau be solely dependent on Mike James, because Mike James, as amazing as he is, you can only go for ISOs, one-on-ones, trying to use his speed, his explosiveness for so many times. You can try something for so many times before they are calling on you and they know exactly what you're going to do and they manage to stop you. Now, Panathinaikos, what would they have to do? I would say, first of all, the two key players in my books, and I'm going to surprise you, are Thanasis Antetokounmpo as a defensive stopper, as an athletic big body, and Nick Calathes. Obviously, the easy pick would be James Gist, but we know that James Gist is going to face a lot of bigger bodies in the paint. So that means, in my books anyways, that the entire supporting crew would have to step up.
And like Aris, you look at sort of the supporting group part of this, because obviously we're going to be talking a lot when watching this series, even when we're just chatting to each other on Messenger, about Calathes, about Luka, about Gist, about sort of the guys you expect to talk about when these two sides are playing. I mean, like, where do you see the strength and rotations here? Like, who's got more options when they make adjustments?
You know what? First of all, I expect a stellar series both from Calathes and Doncic. I think that they will amaze us. And it will not be a surprise to anyone, because this is practically also the series that may decide the MVP award for the regular season, which in the EuroLeague extends also to the playoffs because it's given during the Final Four. So I think that those two are not the case. The main issue that Panathinaikos has not solved yet, despite getting in the nick of the time the home court advantage, is the fact that Panathinaikos has a very peculiar front line. And that was part of their undoing last season against the duo of Judo and Vesely. You know, Bogdan Bogdanovic dominated the series between Fenerbahce and Panathinaikos, when Panathinaikos also had the home court advantage, but got swept by a team that just in the right time played its best basketball of the season. I think that the main issue for Panathinaikos and the main problem for Xavi Pascual will be what will happen if the bigs of Real Madrid perform as they should. I don't know what will happen if Kuzmic was still healthy, but the way that Tavares is performing, I think that he might even be an upgrade compared to Kuzmic. You have also Gustavo Ayon, who is healthy again. You have Reyes, who is always coming up big in important games. On the other side, what Panathinaikos really has? They have an undersized center, because James Gist is playing as a center throughout the season. They have Payne, who is still trying to get used to his new environment. They have Singleton, who is playing from 3 to 5 depending the situation. And they have Ian Vouloukas, who is great on offense, but he has very well-known defensive limitations. If Panathinaikos gets some extra effort from all these guys, or if Zach August or Dinos Mitoglou come out of nowhere in this playoff season, and I don't know about Zach August, but I think that during the last few weeks, Dinos Mitoglou, who is coming from Wake Forest and has a pedigree of being in a situation where there are demands from him, he had some great games, especially in the Greek League. So I think that those guys who are pretty much unknown in the EuroLeague scene can be the difference. If Payne, if Mitoglou, and if Zach August come out of nowhere and provide a good game, that can be a backbreaker for Real Madrid. Because I also agree with Moshe that even if Sergio Yul appears during the series, it will be more a move that can play with the head of Panathinaikos and create a morale boost for Real Madrid. I don't expect Yul, after 8 months of absence, to step on the court and make a difference. He can contribute, but I don't see him taking, let's say, the reins of the game. If he does that, we will be treated to an amazing return. But I think that this is first and foremost because on the backcourt we know what's going to happen. We have Doncic and Kalafis. I believe that this is going to be a frontline battle more than anything else. And while Panathinaikos is having the home court advantage, the practical disadvantage against the front line of Real Madrid simply can't be denied.
Yeah, I find it very hard to disagree with anything you're saying there, Aris, because Real's front line has had so much flux this season compared to most teams, but compared to Panathinaikos, it's just so much more solid looking right now, and you know what you should see with Real Madrid. With Panathinaikos, you probably do as well, but you just don't like the picture, is how I'd put it, and like with good cause. Like, just as an undersized five is an option, obviously, and it's one they go with a lot. But like he's just so clearly better when he's got a bit more space out of the four, and you sort of look at that with again at Singleton, he's gone 3 through 5. It's just not clear what they're going to do with that front line, and not just in a sort of case that it keeps you guessing, but in one that it keeps it hard for them to really develop a rhythm with how they operate there. Like, the individual battles obviously are going to be fascinating, but like you just look at this series and it's almost like of all the opponents Real could have landed, this is the best one in terms of a Tavares situation because it's just really built for him to use his physical traits to really to do some battling in there and do some serious damage. And King Felipe obviously he's like he's not got too many seasons left in him, But like this is another one where he kind of goes, right, I can just go in, use the bulk and power I've got, to be sort of the slight movement of a large man is how I describe Felipe. He's very graceful for a guy of his build, and I'm not calling him fat there. I'm calling him sort of unathletic and look like because like his build is more of the he's got power, but he actually finds a way to be very graceful in how he does it at times. So you look at even those options as kind of going, damn, like Real just have so many ways to just move that ball on the inside that are just so much more natural for them than what Panathinaikos have. I think that's going to be really critical in this one overall. Moshe, before we get to predictions, your thoughts on what you're expecting to see in terms of how this series breaks down as a clash.
I think that the first game would be the one to set the entire tone to the entire series. Meaning, if Madrid could bring down the walls of Oaxaca in the playoffs in game one, it's gonna mess Panathinaikos up real good. And I don't know if they have the mental toughness to bounce back from it. Nor do I know what's gonna happen if Panathinaikos would end up getting swept second season in a row with having the home court advantage. I don't know any buses going straight from Madrid to Athens, if you're asking me. At the same time, I have to say that, again, just like I said a few moments ago, it's going to be about the supporting crew. Like Ari said, names of Mitoglu, or whether it's Zek August or Antetokounmpo or whoever can come and bring something extra that you're not getting, you're not used to getting from him on a day-to-day basis. And I think that essentially that's the one thing that might give Panathinaikos a real shot at doing something. Because if they cannot bring that, then I honestly don't see what they can bring. As good as they are, as special as they can be, as tough as they can get, I don't see what can they do against such a star-packed team like Madrid. And I think it's time to give our predictions. So I'll be the first brave one to say, if game one goes with Real Madrid, I'm going 3-1. I don't see this series either way going to a game 5, going the distance, unless Panathinaikos would manage to keep their home safe. But to be on the safe side, 3-1 Madrid.
Yeah, I find it very hard to see this one going 5 games, almost because it's Pau with the home court, to be honest. Because I was even thinking about this, like, if Panathinaikos had to go to Madrid first, it's almost would have been a better situation for them in one respect, in that if they could steal one game, they're going back to the Oaxaca, one of the toughest places to win in basketball. Instead, now Real are going there first, and if they can steal one, they know Pana's road form is not tremendous, and if they can like split the series, the first 2 games of the series, they're bringing them back to Madrid with a huge advantage for them, in the Whizzing Center. So I'm gonna go with Madrid in 4. If Power are able to get to a 5th game, I can't see them losing game 5 in Athens, but I just don't see them getting to a 5th game. So that's I'm going Real Madrid in 4. Aris?
Yes, we all agree on that. It will be either 3-1 Madrid, which means that Madrid had made a break. I don't think that it's such a big deal if they can do it on game 1 or game 2, because Madrid knows that no matter what happens in game 1, they will have another chance in order to steal a crucial win. And if we go to game 5, then I will say 3-2 Panathinaikos.
And that brings us to halfway point, and we move on to the 2-7 series. Fenerbahce, second this season in the regular season, against Baskonia, 7th. But of course, the stories for both of them was kind of interesting this year, in that Fenerbahce lost some serious talent in the off-season in Bogdanovic and Ekpeudo. And they sort of replaced them very Moneyball style, in terms of trying to replace production rather than bodies, because they were irreplaceable individuals. And it led to, while less explosive at their best, far more consistent at their best as well from Fenerbahce in terms of the results they were putting up to get that second spot overall this season and go in with a home court for the playoffs, the defending champions, of course. And then you got a Baskonia side, which we've covered this story so many times, but the Cliff Notes version, they started terrible, came back, and then became just a monster that was able to get its ass into the playoffs with room to spare in the end. So I'm going to go to Aris first in this one. What are you seeing as the key matchups here between Fenerbahce and Baskonia?
Well, I think that in general, Baskonia can hurt you in every possible way. And the fact that they have Poirier and also Voigtman in such a great shape might push them near the middle, because the truth is that simply Fenerbahce doesn't have the right replacement for Udo at this point, at least. I don't know what will happen for the rest of the season, because if you remember, at this point of the season last year, we were talking about the fact that Fenerbahce will have trebles against Panathinaikos, and they responded with a sweep. I think that they have to find a way to defend against Sengelia, but if Kalinic is at 100%, this might not be such a difficult task. I'm not saying that Kalinic will stop Sengelia from doing anything, but I'm saying that if you had to pick one guy or two, let's say, to stop Sengelia, then Kalinic will be among the top picks on your list. And frankly speaking, I think that the backcourt of Fenerbahce is not slightly, is considerably better than the backcourt of Baskonia, and that's a big difference. I don't see the backcourt of Baskonia matching up with Slukas, with Wanamaker, with Guduric, with Ali Mohammed or Bobby Dixon, if you like. And on the other hand, I see that there are guys like, let's say, Duverioglu, that can give something on the front line and help Jan Vesely, who's going to have monster nights simply because he has the trust of Coach Obradovic, and I expect him to work overtime in the series. I expect a very tough matchup. I expect a real fight from Baskonia, but I really don't see Baskonia shocking Fenerbahce. They will just put up a good fight, and that's it.
And Moshe, of course, Ars mentioned the backcourt advantage Fenerbahce have, and Jason Granger being hurt doesn't really help Baskonia's cause much at all, does it?
No, it does not. Like at all. We claimed Aris. Aris also said it, and he was right in every way possible, saying that throughout the season, Jason Granger has proved to be one of the best point guards of the competition, or combo guards, depends how you look at him. Either way, he made himself known throughout Europe. Like, everyone knew who he was before, but he has a stellar season so far. And him not being fully fit in a backcourt that's already supposed to be not as strong, or at least as deep as the one that you're facing, we're talking issues, big issues. The question is, guys, try to remember what happened a couple years ago with Fener losing Vesely right before the playoff, like 6 weeks it was, just before the playoffs, even not the Final Four, with his Achilles tendon injury. We've seen players that are giving all they got 37 minutes per night. Now, we all love Jan Vesely and what he brings to the table. The question is, could he sustain such an effort? I'm actually thinking that perhaps this series will not go by a sweep. It may go 3-1. I'm giving Coach Martinez a bit more of a credit here. I think that he can pull off something. I'm not saying they're gonna shock Europe and perhaps take Fener down. I am saying they will make them sweat. They will make them fight. And the fact that Fener didn't lose this year to Baskonia only plays to the advantage of Baskonia themselves, because it's very hard to beat a good team 3 times in the course of a season. let alone in a playoff series. And that is something that Coach Blatt said just before, right after he won the EuroLeague in 2014, and I could not agree more. Do you guys really see this year's Baskonia, with what Coach Martinez has managed to achieve so far, do you really see Baskonia going down, not swinging, not fighting, going down with the broom?
Well, it's a tough one, Moshe, honestly, because like even ignoring the opponent for a second, it's just tough to see Vasconia not getting one win in a playoff series this year, given the way they finished their season. Yet at the same time, Fenner got their 2-0 record against him this year. We've got this disadvantage for them with Granger. Like Baskonia went down swinging against Cheska last time out, and they still came out with a donut in the series. It's like so. It's a tough one. Like I could see Baskonia certainly forcing some close ones, possibly even picking up a win. But yeah, no, it's a strange series to call. And not so much in terms of the result, but in terms of sort of what type of basketball we'll see and how it'll play out overall. Because I think we're pretty united on what we're going to expect to see from the results side of things. It is a confusing one, as how I describe it, in terms of that part. I look at Baskonia and kind of going, there's definitely going to be periods where they look in individual games where they look like a much better side than Fenerbahce. There will be those phases in games, especially when Vesely has to sit, like because much as I think Zoc is more than willing to like sort of run Vesely like the like a hard running workhorse in this one, he also knows he wants Vesely to be able to play ludicrous minutes in Belgrade, assuming they get there, and that involves keeping him in good nick, not having him sort of get any wear and tear too much. So it's a very tough one to see in terms of that next stage, in terms of what's going to happen. I can see Baskonia possibly winning a game, but that's more because of my difficulty in seeing them not my difficulty in seeing them getting swept. I suppose Aris, like Baskonia, like again, like not even the upset. Like, can you see them making a series out of this at least?
Well, I don't. But we can talk for hours because Baskonia is everyone's favorite underdog. And I really expect also a big game from Matt Janning and Rodrigo Bobois somewhere in the series. Two of the guys that are also really underappreciated for what they're doing in general in Europe. And Rodrigo Bobois, from my standpoint, is also a great story because he was the man destined to be the next Tony Parker. And injuries stole him that opportunity, but he returned to Europe and he's playing on a high level. So this is a story on its own merit. But I have to be realist here. I don't think that Fenerbahce will let anything easy for Baskonia. And you know that Obradovic, since sitting on the bench of Fenerbahce, has a 9-0 record in the playoffs. So even if Baskonia gets one win, it will be a huge accomplishment for them. So I give them that one win, and I'm saying that Fenerbahce will get to the Final Four with a 3-1 total record in the series.
Well, I'll go next in the pick in this one. I think Obradovic makes it 12-0 with Fener in the playoffs. Much as I'd love to sort of be able to make a call for Baskonia to steal a game or two, I just can't. I gotta go with a Fener sweep. Moshe?
I'd like to say sweep, but I'm just not brave enough on this one. And I'm saying that despite of the fact that Granger has a sprained ankle and would probably, and again, I do not know this for sure. I don't have any prior information. I'm just assuming that he would have to get shots in order to play. So at the same time, I don't know which side of me saying that. Is it something because of my love for the sports, the romance of the sports? Potentially speaking, I do believe that this series might actually have the chance to go the distance. I don't see Fener getting eliminated. I am giving Fener the Final Four spot. Look, Obradovic has yet to lose a best-of-5 series. It's a known fact till now. At the same time, he never won back-to-back years, and that is something that we've said at the final episode of the Final Four in Istanbul last year when we talked about the quest for Lazakima. So I'm giving him the Final Four. Not sure if he can take it. 3. I'll go with Aris on this one. You know what? 3-1.
And that brings on to our final series, the 3-6 series, which is Olympiacos versus Zalgiris Kaunas. Because Zalgiris, of course, have been the story of the season. Sarunas Jaskovicius came into this year as the hottest property in European coaching and only improved his stock. Zalgiris not really tipped by anyone to contend for the playoffs. Most folk figured that they could match last year, or at least come close to matching last year, where they look good for a while, hang around, and then eventually fade away. Instead, they had to grit it out for a while before eventually securing the 6th slot. And for large parts of the season, they were very much in contention for a home court slot in the playoffs. That's how good Zaras kept them in terms of their road to get to the postseason. They're also getting playoff basketball in Kaunas, pretty cool given the current financial state of EuroLeague. One of the least financially sort of capable clubs in Europe in terms of the resources available to them in EuroLeague, and they've just gone out and shown what you can do when you've got a smart plan, a good coach, and know who to sign. And obviously Kevin Pangos has probably been the ideal example there, and that he's a guy who would play playoff ball for any club in Europe, but it's the fit he has in Kaunas that really makes him stand out there, as opposed to if he was donning any other jersey. I'm going to go with Moshe on this one first. Moshe, obviously Oli are heavy favourites for this, but how do you see the series sort of shaking out? What are going to be the key battles for you?
I hope you can make popcorn deliveries overnight from Ireland to here. Pretty much. I'm expecting one hell of a series. I cannot predict if this series can go the distance, but if it will, this would be by far the most enjoyable series that we could have asked for. At the same time, Olympiacos are coming as clear favorite. And that's despite Žalgiris managing to get the win against Olympiacos in the last game of the regular season. Look, Žalgiris can put up a fight. Will they have what it takes, including the experience needed to take a playoff series? The experience needed to get a win against such a team as Olympiacos? I do not know. I do not think so, but at the same time, we are talking about a fox, one named Sharas. So, who knows? Who really knows?
And Aris, your own thoughts on this series and how it's going to play out?
I really believe that the main factor here is that the pressure that Olympiacos will feel, while Žalgiris has already done something that hadn't been done by the club for almost 20 years. So they can't be happy with themselves. It's also bad news for Žalgiris that they won that last game at Piraeus. If Olympiacos had won that game, maybe Jasikevičius could have hoped that the Reds could have also let their guard down for the playoffs. It's interesting to note that Žalgiris has beaten twice Olympiacos in the regular season, but on both two games, Olympiacos was not playing at full strength. They had key players missing in the first game. Spanoulis was absent in the second game. Papanikolaou and Printezis were not there, and practically Olympiacos hasn't faced Žalgiris yet in a must-win game at full strength. Even the last game practically hurt only Real Madrid and not Olympiacos in the final standings. What I'm trying to say here is that no matter how good Žalgiris can be, Olympiacos will probably be better. But I'm giving a game to Žalgiris. I don't believe that this is going to be a sweep. On the contrary. Since my hunch is that the series will end up at 3-1 in favor of Olympiacos, considering how crazy is the diagram of Olympiacos concerning the ups and downs of the team during the season, they have beaten, let's say, twice Real Madrid, and when they lose badly, they lose by 30 points. I wouldn't be surprised if Olympiacos dropped a game at Piraeus and then won 2 on the road against Žalgiris. But I really have no doubt that a full-strength Olympiacos, it's a much better. They're a much better team than Žalgiris. So the only question is if Olympiacos will be healthy enough, because the last problem of the team was a minor injury of Yannis Strelnieks. We are not 100% sure that both Printezis and Papanikolaou will be present in the games against Žalgiris. We expect them to be, but we don't know yet. The injuries will be a factor, and they can give hope to Žalgiris. But in theory, I don't see a way for Žalgiris to beat a focused and full-strength Olympiacos.
So Moshe, that's Aris calling it 3-1. What do you see the sort of the final shakeup in this one being?
All I'm saying is that if I'm Olympiacos, I do not want to drop a game at home because Žalgiris Arena sold out. We've seen Žalgiris pulling off some miracles over there. You do not want to give them any idea or any glimpse of hope that they have a chance at this playoff series, because if they will even sense that they will have some sort of something, we're going to in for the long run.
You are totally right on that. I agree on that. But what I'm saying is that Olympiacos have been so much inconsistent between the big wins and the big losses that nothing will surprise me concerning Olympiacos. Even if they drop a game at Piraeus, it will not be a surprise for Olympiacos to win 2 games on the road. I'm not saying that will be ideal. I'm just saying that Olympiacos at this point, it's highly unpredictable, and they have a very peculiar roster with more than a ton of foreign players who can at any given moment win a game by themselves. Olympiacos has the luxury to get Bobby Brown off the bench. I don't think that we have seen what Olympiacos can do having a bench with players like Kyle Wilger, like Hollis Thompson, like Bobby Brown, and I'm not sure that we have the time at this point of the season to shoot them at full strength. But if you just look at the roster of the team, it's mind-blowing. Taking it just by the names and the pedigree and the achievements of each player, you could argue that Olympiacos is currently the top roster in the league. And the question is how this roster will perform and what kind of chemistry they will have.
I simply agree, and with that, I would say 3-1, or I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but perhaps this is the only series that actually have the highest probability of making it to till game 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that as well. Like, even though on the face of things, you know, the casual observer would say because of the closeness of the match in many respects, Panathinaikos versus Real should be. This one, I think, because of the unpredictability factor with Oli above all else, definitely has the strongest chance to go 5. And I think what Aris just touched on is that tendency that when Oli drop a game, it's one of those, oh, we just got our asses up and no one saw that coming type losses. So you kind of go with that. I'm going 3-1 as well. I think we're straight 3-1s here in this one. And I really just see Žalgiris being good enough, frankly, as a basketball team to get a win at some point in this series. Not good enough to win this series, but certainly to get a single game win, possibly even 2. So yeah, that's again, fantastic season for Žalgiris. Fun fact for those of you tuning in to this show, we are recording on Saturday, and I landed back in Ireland with next to no sleep about 4-5 hours before I started recording. So I will be...
Sunday, Emmett, we're Sunday.
Yes, it's Sunday. You are still on US time.
Exactly. So it's Sunday. I don't even know what day it is, literally. Not least because I was meant to fly out on Friday instead of Saturday, but that's another story for another day, guys. So I'm going to be falling asleep shortly after we finish recording is what I was getting to, by the way, folks. So when you tune into this, I'll have slept very soon after we stopped recording. So thanks to all of y'all for your help in this show. I'm gonna pass off to Aris to start off our farewells and goodbyes ahead of the playoffs.
So you can find me as usual at Eurohoops.net, at the social media channel of Eurohoops, on my personal social media on Facebook and Twitter, and also you can hear me and sometimes see me at Cosmote TV.
And when I get out of bed later, you'll be able to find me at BIE_basketball on Twitter, ballineurope.com, and Facebook is look for Ball in Europe, and same for that on YouTube.
Emma, just to be clear, when you wake up, it's going to be Monday, perhaps. I hope.
Yeah, I'm planning on sleeping for 36 hours straight if I can.
Solid. And with that being said, you can always find me where you can always find me at I am Team Scout and at MosesB1 on Twitter, the Facebook page Team Scout, the website itself teamscout.net. So yeah, till next time.